Red Zone, Book 1, Wipeout Squad Audiobook Series.
Chapter 9, Chat and Mouse and Stitch's Awakening. The detonation sequence began with a sharp electronic chirp from Breach's remote. 3 charges, 3 support columns, 3 seconds between each blast. Steele counted down in his head as the team sprinted for cover behind an overturned information kiosk. 1. The first support column exploded in a shower of concrete dust and twisted rebar. The sound was muffled by the red fog, but Steele felt it through his boots, a deep tremor that shook the mall's foundations. 2. The second charge detonated, and the mezzanine floor groaned like a dying animal. Steele risked a glance backward and saw tons of rubble beginning its inevitable descent toward the wounded Hydra. 3. The final charge blew, and physics took over with brutal finality. Down! Everyone down! Steele threw himself flat, pulling Wolf down beside him. The scientist clutched his precious data drive, protecting it even as debris rained around them. The mezzanine collapsed in sections. First the western edge, then the center, then the entire second floor pancaking onto the Hydra's position. The creature's 3 heads reared up in one final act of defiance, mandibles snapping at empty air, before 20 tons of concrete buried it alive. The impact sent a shockwave of dust and fog rolling through the atrium. Steele's HUD went haywire, flickering between thermal and optical modes as particulates overwhelmed his sensors. For 10 seconds, the world was nothing but gray-brown chaos and the sound of settling rubble. Then, silence. Steele pushed himself up, checking his team. Hammer had shielded Stitch's stretcher with his own armored bulk. Deadeye was coughing but mobile. Breach sat against a wall, his wounded shoulder cradled, a satisfied grin on his face visible through his faceplate. "Got it," Breach said simply. "That's what I call a proper demo." "Boss," Deadeye called out, his enhanced vision cutting through the dust. "The Hydra. I'm not getting a thermal signal anymore." "Confirmed," Steele replied, studying his own HUD. Where the creature had been was now just a mountain of rubble, still settling, dust motes dancing in the faint light. "It's buried. Dead or close enough." "We should move before—" Wolf started, then stopped. His portable scanner was beeping urgently. "Wait, Sergeant, I'm reading something. Biological activity spiking in the rubble. Not decreasing, increasing." Steele felt cold dread settle in his gut. "Explain." "The Hydra, it's not dead. It's—" Wolf's eyes widened behind his faceplate. "Oh God, it's rupturing. Internal pressure building. It's going to—" The rubble pile exploded. Not with fire or concussive force, but with something worse. A massive bloom of red spores that burst from the Hydra's corpse like a crimson mushroom cloud. The spores hung in the air for one frozen moment, backlit by the mall's emergency lighting. Beautiful and terrible. Then they began to fall. "Filters!" Steele shouted. "Check your damn filters!" But it was too late. The spore cloud was already settling over them, millions of microscopic particles designed by the Crimson virus to seek out and penetrate any organic surface. Steele's HUD showed his suit's integrity dropping as the spores found microscopic tears in the seals, gaps around joints, any pathway to reach human flesh. "Can't breathe," Deadeye gasped, clawing at his helmet. "Something's eating through the filters. I can taste it. Copper and rot." Steele checked his own filter status. 47% integrity. 42. 38. The spores were devouring the filtration membrane, turning it into Swiss cheese in real time. He tried to draw a breath and got a lungful of something that burned like acid. "Breach, status," Steele called out, but his voice came out as a wheeze. "Filters are shot," Breach replied, his words slurred. "Shoulders numb. Can't feel my arm. Boss, I think I'm—" The demolitions expert collapsed mid-sentence, his body hitting the floor with the dead weight of unconsciousness. "Breach!" Hammer moved toward him, but his own movements were sluggish. The big man's massive frame swayed like a tree in a storm. "I got you, brother. Just hold on." Hammer went down next, his sledgehammer clattering from nerveless fingers. Steele felt his own vision darkening at the edges. His HUD showed filter integrity at 12%. The spores had eaten through the membrane, and now they were eating through his lungs. Each breath was like inhaling ground glass mixed with battery acid. "Wolf, status," Steele called out, but his voice came out as a wheeze. "Filters are shot," Breach replied, his words slurred. "Shoulders numb. Can't feel my arm. Boss, I think I'm—" The demolitions expert collapsed mid-sentence, his body hitting the floor with the dead weight of unconsciousness. "Breach!" Hammer moved toward him, but his own movements were sluggish. The big man's massive frame swayed like a tree in a storm. "I gotcha, brother. Just hold on." Hammer went down next, his sledgehammer clattering from nerveless fingers. Steele felt his own vision darkening at the edges. His HUD showed filter integrity at 12%. The spores had eaten through the membrane, and now they were eating through his lungs. Each breath was like inhaling ground glass mixed with battery acid. "Wolf!" Steele tried to reach the scientist, tried to form words, but his tongue felt thick and useless. "The filters! Clean them! You have to!" Wolf was fumbling with a medical kit, his hands shaking worse than ever. He pulled out what looked like cleaning solution, squirted it onto Deadeye's filter housing. But his movements were wrong, frantic, panicked, completely inefficient. "I don't know what I'm doing," Wolf admitted, his voice breaking. "I'm a virologist, not a field medic. I study cellular structures, not combat equipment. Not like that." A new voice, weak and raspy, cut through the chaos. Steele's head snapped around. Stitch's eyes were open, bloodshot and unfocused, but open. The medic's lips moved, forming words with obvious effort. "Give it. Here." Stitch's hand reached out, trembling with the effort of movement. "Wolf, you're doing it wrong." "Stitch?" Wolf's voice carried desperate hope. "You're awake? Thank God, I need—" "Shut up and listen." Stitch's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. "The filters, you're flooding them, drowning the membrane, in solution. Makes it worse." Wolf looked at the dripping filter housing in his hands, realization dawning. "Then what do I dry clean first?" Stitch was trying to sit up, his body refusing to cooperate. "Compressed air, blow out the spores, then minimal solution, just enough to—" His words trailed off as consciousness tried to drag him back under, but his hand was still reaching, still gesturing weakly toward Wolf's medical kit. "Compressed air canister," Wolf said, understanding flooding through him. He grabbed the device, pressed it against Hammer's filter housing, and triggered a burst of pressurized nitrogen. Black spores sprayed out, carried away by the jet of gas. "Like this?" "Yes, now, solution. 2 drops, no more." Stitch's eyes were closing again, the effort of staying conscious too much. "Seal it, mechanical pressure, not chemical." Wolf worked with new purpose, following Stitch's fading instructions. Hammer's filter first, then Breach's, then Deadeye's. Each time, the procedure was the same. Blow out the spores with compressed air, apply minimal solution, reseal with mechanical pressure clips rather than relying on chemical bonding. Steele felt his own filter housing come free, felt the blessed rush of clean air, or as clean as anything got on Caro 7, flood his lungs. The burning sensation faded, replaced by the more familiar ache of overtaxed muscles and battle fatigue. "Stitch," Steele gasped, crawling toward the medic. "Stay with us. We need you. You need to stay awake." But Stitch's eyes were closed again, his breathing shallow but steady, unconscious but alive. And his brief moment of lucidity had saved all their lives. "He's stable," Wolf reported, his scanner pressed against Stitch's neck. "Vital signs are stronger than before. The coma I think it was the only way his brain could heal from the psychic trauma. Now that he's touched consciousness once, he should be able to surface more often." "Boss," Deadeye's voice came over comms, stronger now that he could breathe. "We've got problems. The floor, it's not stable." Steele looked down and saw what the sniper meant. The mezzanine collapse had sent shockwaves through the mall's foundation. Cracks were spreading across the tiles like a spider web, each one growing wider by the second. And beneath the cracks, darkness, the shopping mall's service levels, built over old pre-war infrastructure. "Everyone back," Steele ordered, grabbing Wolf in Stitch's stretcher. "The floor's about to—" The tiles gave way, with a sound like 1,000 plates shattering simultaneously. Steele fell. The sensation of freefall lasted only a heartbeat before his armored body crashed through rotten ceiling panels and slammed into the floor of the service level below. His ceramic armor absorbed most of the impact, but he still felt ribs creak and his shoulder scream protest. Around him, the rest of the team was falling through the widening breach. Hammer landed with a crash that dented the floor beneath him. Breach hit a support column and bounced off, cursing. Deadeye managed a controlled fall, his sniper instincts guiding him to a relatively clear spot. Wolf and Stitch's stretcher came down together, the scientist desperately trying to cushion the medic's unconscious form. "Sound off," Steele commanded, pushing himself up. His HUD was cracked but functional, showing hour 8:37. Then it jumped, hour 8:31. The desynchronization was getting worse. Deadeye, green, bruised but mobile. Breach, greenish, my shoulder definitely doesn't like me anymore. Hammer here, landing hurt, but I've had worse. Wolf and Stitch both intact, the scientist reported. Miraculously, the stretcher held. Steele's helmet lamp illuminated their new surroundings. They were in a maintenance corridor, decades old, filled with rusted pipes and corroded electrical conduits. The walls were slick with condensation and something else, a biological film that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. And the red fog was here too, thicker at this depth, pooling in low spots like liquid. "Where are we?" Hammer asked, his sledgehammer back in his hands. "Service level," Steele replied, checking his tactical map. The HUD overlay was glitching, but he could make out their approximate position. Below the shopping mall, above the metro system. These corridors connect to the city's old utility infrastructure. That's when they heard it, a sound from above that made Steele's blood run cold. Movement, lots of it. And then shapes began dropping through the breach they'd created, descending into the service level with purpose. Crawlers, but these weren't the living kind. Through his helmet's beam, Steele saw them clearly. The mutants they'd killed during the initial assault, the ones that had died when the mezzanine collapsed. Their bodies were broken, movements jerky and uncoordinated, but they were moving, rising, hunting. "The pi storm," Wolf breathed, his scanner going crazy with readings. "The pressure wave from the Hydra's death. It's reanimating recently dead tissue. Temporary motor function without higher brain activity. They're like zombies, but worse, driven by pure network programming." "How many?" demanded, counting the shapes dropping through the breach. 6, 10, 15. "Too many," Deadeye replied, his rifle tracking targets despite having no ammunition. "Boss, we need to move, now." But Hammer was staring at something in the darkness ahead, his enhanced vision picking up details the others couldn't see. "Wait, boss, look, straight ahead, about 30 meters. There's a blast door, military grade by the look of it. If we can get through—" "Do it," Steele decided. There was no other option. Behind them, the reanimated crawlers were finding their rhythm, remembering how to hunt even through death. "Breach, can you blow the door?" "I've got one det pack left," Breach said, already moving toward the blast door despite his wounded shoulder. "But it's going to be loud, really loud. Every mutant in the complex is going to know where we are." "They already know," Steele replied grimly. "The network marked us when we killed the broodmother. We're not hiding anymore, we're just surviving." As Breach worked on placing his last explosive charge, Steele noticed something that made his tactical instincts scream warning. The reanimated crawlers weren't charging. They were positioning themselves, forming a perimeter, cutting off escape routes. And they were synchronized, moving as one organism despite being individually dead. "The network is still controlling them," Wolf said, his voice tight with scientific horror. "Even in death, the psionic link persists. We're not fighting individuals. We're fighting a distributed intelligence using corpse puppets as its soldiers." Steele checked Stitch's stretcher. The medic's eyes were open again, barely, but open. His lips moved soundlessly, and Steele leaned in close to hear. "Boss," Stitch's voice was a thread of sound. I can move, with support. Stop treating me like cargo." Despite everything, Steele felt a surge of hope. "You sure? You were in a coma 20 minutes ago." "Felt like 20 years." Stitch tried to smile. "Help me up. I can walk if someone steadies me." Hammer was there instantly, his massive arm going around Stitch's shoulders. "I got you, brother. Lean on me." Stitch stood on shaking legs, supported by Hammer's strength. His face was pale, his movements uncertain, but he was conscious, functional. Maybe not combat ready, but no longer deadweight. "Charge is set," Breach announced. "On your mark, boss. 3-second fuse." "Everyone behind cover," Steele ordered. "Breach, blow it. Then we move fast. The reanimated ones are slow, but there will be living mutants responding to the noise." "Light it up," Breach said, triggering his remote. The blast door exploded inward, the shaped charge doing exactly what it was designed to do, focusing the explosion to blow the locking mechanism without bringing down the entire corridor. The sound was deafening, even through their helmets' audio dampeners. "Move, move, move!" Steele pushed Wolf through the opening, then helped Hammer get Stitch across. Deadeye provided rear security, his empty rifle held ready to club anything that got too close. Breach came last, his good hand on his carbine. They made it through just as the first reanimated crawler reached the blast door. The thing's movements were jerky, its broken body barely functional, but its eyes tracked them with the network's intelligence. It opened its mouth, probably to shriek or call for reinforcements, but Hammer slammed the remains of the blast door closed, cutting off the sound. "That won't hold them long," Hammer said, looking for something to brace the door with. "Doesn't have to," Steele replied, checking his HUD. They were in another service corridor, but this one showed signs of recent use. The walls were cleaner, the lights more functional. "We just need enough time to put distance between us and them." "Boss," Deadeye called from ahead, "you need to see this." Steele joined the sniper at a junction where their corridor intersected with a larger passage. The walls here were painted with military stencils, "Evacuation Route Alpha, authorized personnel only." And beneath that, in fresher paint, "Follow arrows to surface." Someone had marked a path, recently, by the look of it. "Survivors?" Wolf suggested hopefully. "Other cleanup teams?" "Or a trap," Breach countered. "The network knows our tactics, knows we'd follow military markings." Steele studied the arrows. His tactical mind worked through scenarios, probabilities, risks. They were low on ammunition, one man wounded, one barely conscious, being tracked by an entire city's worth of mutants. Following unknown markings was dangerous. Not following them was suicidal. "We follow the arrows," Steele decided, "but weapons ready. Breach, if you see anything that looks like a kill zone, you call it immediately." They moved out, Hammer supporting Stitch, who grew steadier with each step but still needed assistance. Behind them, through the sealed blast door, they could hear the scrape of claws on metal, the reanimated crawlers trying to follow. And beneath that sound, something else. A rhythmic pulsing, like a heartbeat, coming from deeper in the complex. The network was alive down here, aware, watching. Steele's HUD flickered. Hour 8:52. They'd been on Caro 7 for almost 9 hours. 15 hours of suppressor protection remained, but Steele knew the math was wrong. The infection was already changing them. He could feel it in his sharpened reflexes, in the way his eyes could pick out details in the fog that should have been invisible. "Boss," Stitch said, his voice stronger now, When we stop, I need to check everyone for infection signs." "Later," Steele replied. "Right now we move. The mutants can smell blood, and we're bleeding from a dozen places. Every second we stand still is a second they get closer. They followed the arrows through a maze of corridors, always ascending, always toward the surface. And with each step, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, guided, led somewhere by an intelligence that knew exactly where they were going. Hour 9:03 flashed on his HUD, then jumped. Hour 9:04. Time was breaking down. The psionic interference was getting worse. He could feel it in his sharpened reflexes, in the way his eyes could pick out details in the fog that should have been invisible. "Boss," Stitch said, his voice stronger now. When we stop, I need to check everyone for infection signs." "Later," replied. "Right now we move. The mutants can smell blood, and we're bleeding from a dozen places. Every second we stand still is a second they get closer." They followed the arrows through a maze of corridors, always ascending, always toward the surface. And with each step, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, guided, led somewhere by an intelligence that knew exactly where they were going. Hour 9:09 flashed on his HUD, then jumped. Hour 9:03. Time was breaking down. The psionic interference was getting worse. "Boss," Stitch said, his voice stronger now. When we stop, I need to check everyone for infection signs." "Later," replied. "Right now we move. The mutants can smell blood, and we're bleeding from a dozen places. Every second we stand still is a second they get closer." They followed the arrows through a maze of corridors, always ascending, always toward the surface. And with each step, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, guided, led somewhere by an intelligence that knew exactly where they were going. Hour 9:09 flashed on his HUD, then jumped. Hour 9:03. Time was breaking down. The psionic interference was getting worse. Chapter 10: Red Storm and Time Loops. The evacuation route arrows led them through a warren of maintenance tunnels that grew progressively narrower. Steele's HUD flickered between hour 9:14 and hour 9:08, the temporal dysynchronization making his head ache with each jump. Behind them, the scrape of claws on metal had faded, the reanimated crawlers either lost or waiting for a better ambush point. "Hold." Steele raised his fist, and the team froze. Ahead, the corridor opened into what looked like a junction chamber. His helmet lamp revealed multiple passages branching off in different directions, but something was wrong. The red fog here wasn't just thick, it was moving wrong, swirling in patterns that defied physics. Eddies that reversed themselves, currents that flowed upward. "Boss," Deadeye's voice was tight. "My scope's showing impossible readings. I'm getting thermal signatures from 3 directions, but they're the same signatures, like echoes." "Psionic interference," Wolf said, his scanner beeping frantically. "The network's activity is spiking. Something big is happening. The fog itself is becoming—" He was cut off by Stitch suddenly pulling away from Hammer's support. The medic stumbled but caught himself against the wall, his legs shaking but holding. "Stitch, what are you doing?" Hammer reached for him, but the medic waved him off. "I'm done being carried," Stitch said, his voice hoarse but determined. He fumbled at his medical kit with trembling hands, pulling out one of the combat stimulants, one of the ones he'd marked as clean. Better a mutant later than a corpse now. "Wait," Steele stepped forward. "Those stims accelerate infection," Wolf said. I know what Wolf said. Stitch pressed the auto-injector against his neck. The hiss of compressed air was loud in the confined space. "I also know we're all infected already. The suppressors just slow it down. This stim buys us time, buys you a functional medic." The effect was almost immediate. Color flooded back into Stitch's face. His hand steadied. His eyes focused with sudden clarity that was almost disturbing. He straightened, testing his balance, and when he moved, it was with the fluid precision of a combat veteran. "How do you feel?" Wolf asked, his scanner pressed against Stitch's neck. "Like I could run a marathon and perform surgery at the same time," Stitch's smile was sharp. Also, like my blood is on fire and my heart's trying to punch through my ribs. But I'm functional. That's what matters. Steel studied his medic's face. The stim had done more than restore function. Stitch's pupils were dilated, his movements almost too precise, enhanced. The crimson virus and the combat stimulant were interacting, accelerating changes that were already beginning. Your call, Steel said quietly. Can you fight? I can do more than fight. I can save your asses when you screw up. Stitch picked up his carbine, checked the action with practiced ease. Let's move. We're burning time. They entered the junction chamber, and immediately Steel felt something was wrong. The air pressure was fluctuating, increasing, decreasing, making his ears pop. The red fog swirled faster, creating vortexes that appeared and vanished. And through it all, he heard sounds that shouldn't exist. Gunfire, his own voice shouting orders, the crash of hammer sledgehammer. All of it echoing from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Contact front. Deadeye's rifle came up, tracking movement in the fog. Steel saw it too. A figure in cleanup armor, moving through the crimson haze with familiar tactical precision. For one heart-stopping moment, he thought it was another survivor. Then, the figure turned, and Steel found himself staring at his own face. The duplicate Steel moved exactly like him. Same posture, same weapon handling, same scan pattern. But something was off. The movements were too perfect, like watching a recording rather than a living person. Boss, Breach whispered. That's you. How is that you? It's not, Deadeye said, his scope tracking the duplicate. Thermal signature is wrong, 0.8 degrees too high. It's a mimic, but it's doing something new. The duplicate Steel raised its weapon, targeting the real Steel. When it spoke, the voice was perfect. Steel's own words from earlier, probably recorded during their radio communications. Fall back to the stairwell. I'll cover your six. Don't listen to it, Steel commanded, his empty carbine useless in his hands. Everyone, eyes on me, the real me. 3 signal protocol, now. He tapped his transmit button 3 times. Around him, his team responded with 2 taps each, except the duplicate, which stood silent, its perfect mimicry broken by its inability to access their encrypted channel. Light it up, Steel ordered. Hammer charged. The duplicate tried to dodge, but the big man's sledgehammer was already in motion. The weapon connected with the mimic's shoulder, and the illusion shattered. The creature's form rippled, trying to maintain its disguise, but the damage was too severe. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, and the thing's face melted into something alien before solidifying again into Steel's features. It's learning faster, Wolf breathed. That mimic was almost perfect, if not for the thermal differential. Movement, Stitch called out, his stim-enhanced reflexes giving him split-second advantage. Multiple contacts, all around us. Through the fog, more figures appeared. Steel saw himself 3 more times, each one moving independently. Saw Hammer's massive form. Saw what looked like Lieutenant Raven in full armor. The mimics were coordinating, creating a funhouse mirror of the squad itself. But then Steel noticed something that made his tactical mind scream warning. Beyond the mimics, through gaps in the fog, he saw the junction chamber itself. Saw their team entering. Saw himself raising his hand in a halt gesture. He was watching the past. Their arrival in this chamber played back in the fog like a holographic recording. Temporal echo, Wolf said, his voice rising with scientific horror. The psionic interference is so strong, it's creating visual echoes of recent events. We're seeing our own past overlaid on the present. Then which is real? Breach demanded, his weapon tracking between targets. Which one do we shoot? The answer came from above. The ceiling exploded inward, and the Hydra's center head crashed through, mandible snapping. But the creature was different now. Its body was covered in bite marks, its armor plates cracked and missing. And clinging to it, Tearing at its flesh with savage fury were the reanimated crawlers. The undead mutants were devouring the Hydra alive. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated, but driven by pure network programming that overrode even death. They ripped chunks of flesh from the Hydra's body, their own broken forms allowing them to access areas the living couldn't reach. "The network's losing control," Wolf said, staring at the carnage. "The reanimated ones are operating on base programming. Feed, consume, spread. Without higher intelligence to direct them, they're attacking anything with biomass, even other mutants." The Hydra thrashed, its 3 heads trying to fight off the swarm. But for every crawler it crushed, 3 more poured through the ceiling breach. The creature's death scream was a sound that made Steel's bones vibrate, a psychic wail of pure agony. "Breach, seal the exits," Steel ordered. "We do not want to be here when that thing dies." The demolitions expert moved with his good arm, dragging a heavy maintenance cart in front of the main passage. Hammer grabbed a structural beam, wedging it against another doorway. Stitch was already at the 3rd exit, his stim-enhanced strength allowing him to tip over a bank of old equipment to create a barrier. But the temporal echoes were getting worse. Steel saw multiple versions of his team moving through the chamber, some in the past, some in what might be the future. In one echo, he saw himself lying dead on the floor, his armor torn open. In another, he saw the team retreating successfully, Stitch conscious and mobile. "Which one is real?" Deadeye asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. "Which future happens?" "All of them. None of them." Wolf was studying his scanner, trying to make sense of impossible readings. "The psionic storm is collapsing cause and effect. We're experiencing temporal superposition, multiple timelines existing simultaneously until observation collapses them into—" Static exploded over their comms. Not their encrypted channel, but the open frequency they'd been monitoring. A voice cut through the interference. Mechanical, wrong, but unmistakably Lieutenant Raven's. "Command, this is Lieutenant Raven. Operation successful. All objectives complete. Squad returning to base. Raven out." The transmission repeated, word perfect, each iteration identical to the last. No emotion, no inflection, just mechanical replication. "That's her voice," Breach said quietly, "but that's not her." "No," Deadeye confirmed, his enhanced hearing picking up details the others missed. "The pitch is perfect, the cadence is perfect, but there's no breathing, no background noise, no life. It is speaking with her voice." Steele remembered Raven's last real transmission, the panic, the warning about puppeteers in the walls. That had been hours ago. Since then, only this mechanical message, repeating on loop. "She's dead," Steele said flatly, making the call that needed to be made. Or, worse, the network has her. That transmission is bait, trying to draw survivors toward a trap. Or, Wolf suggested quietly, it's the network practicing, learning how to sound human, testing its ability to mimic our communication protocols. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. If the network could perfectly replicate human voices, human radio communications, how would they ever know what was real? The Hydra's death scream cut off abruptly as the reanimated crawlers overwhelmed it. The creature's body collapsed, crushing dozens of the undead mutants beneath its bulk. But the remaining crawlers didn't stop. They continued tearing at the corpse with mindless fury, driven by programming that couldn't comprehend victory or defeat. "They're cannibalizing it," Stitch observed, his medic's eye seeing details the others missed. "The network's command structure is fragmenting. Higher forms dead, lower forms reverting to base instincts. They'll eat each other until there's nothing left." "Good," Hammer said grimly. "Less for us to fight." Steele's HUD flickered. Hour 10:23. Then jumped backward. Hour 10:19. Forward. Hour 10:27. The temporal anomalies were worsening, making it impossible to trust even their equipment chronometers. "Boss," Deadeye called from his position by one of the sealed exits, "the fog's changing, look." Steele saw it immediately. The red fog was no longer swirling, it was solidifying, crystallizing in mid-air. Translucent formations appeared and vanished, like watching ice form and melt in fast forward. And within those crystals, he saw faces, hundreds of them, thousands, all the people the Crimson virus had consumed. "They're stored," Wolf braved. "The network isn't just killing, it's archiving. Every victim's neural pattern preserved in crystalline structures. That's how the mimics work. They're accessing stored memories, stored appearances, stored voices." "You're saying the network has a library of every person it's killed?" Breach's voice carried horror. "Worse, it has their minds, their memories, their entire identities, stored and accessible. When you see a mimic wearing someone's face, you're seeing that person, or rather, what's left of them." The mechanical transmission came again. "Operation successful. All objectives complete. Squad returning to base." "We need to move," Steele decided. "The temporal anomalies are going to get worse before they get better. This chamber is a psionic focal point. Too much network activity, too many mutants dying, too much psychic bleed over." "Which way?" Hammer asked, looking at the sealed exits they'd created. Steele checked his tactical overlay, watching it flicker between multiple possible routes. In one timeline, they took the North Passage and died in an ambush. In another, they went east and found survivors. In a third, they went west and the floor collapsed. "North Passage," Steele said, making the choice that felt right in his gut. "Breach, clear the blockage." As they worked to open the sealed exit, Steele caught movement in his peripheral vision. Turned to see himself, another duplicate, another mimic, standing in the exact spot he'd been moments before. The duplicate was moving through the same motions, giving the same orders, an echo of the present playing out in real time. "Boss," Stitch said quietly, standing beside him, "your timer, check it." Steele looked at his HUD. Hour 11:47. They'd jumped forward more than an hour they couldn't remember, an hour that might not have even happened. The temporal anomalies had consumed time itself, collapsing it into impossible configurations. "How long until the suppressor fails?" Stitch asked. Steele did the math, trying to account for the time jumps and desynchronization. 12 hours, maybe 13. Hard to say when we can't trust our chronometers. "Half our protection gone," Hammer observed, helping Breach clear the passage. "And we're still in the middle of hell." The mechanical transmission came one final time. Operation successful, returning to base. Then silence. "She's really gone," Breach said quietly, a statement, not a question. Steele nodded. "Lieutenant Raven, her entire squad, all of them consumed by the network. Their voices and faces added to the library of stolen identities. The thought of facing his own men, their forms twisted into mimics, made his stomach churn. "North Passage is clear," Hammer announced. They moved through the opening, into a corridor that looked structurally sound. Behind them, the reanimated crawlers continued their feast on the Hydra's corpse, and the temporal echoes played out battles that happened, were happening, would happen. Steele's HUD settled on hour 12:03. Exactly 12 hours since deployment. Exactly half their suppressor protection gone. Ahead, the red fog swirled with promise and threat. Behind, the network's vast intelligence studied them, learned from them, prepared its next move. And somewhere in the collapsed quantum foam of broken time, Lieutenant Raven's voice echoed forever. Operation successful.
Thank you for listening. New chapters will be released daily on the channel. This audio material was produced exclusively for the Section 56 channel. All rights reserved.